And throughout his presentation, the word that probably was repeated most often was the word dignity. And I can assure the minister that he and I find that word to be one of commonality between us. That this work, this ministry cannot do its work unless it embraces the virtue and the practice of bringing dignity to the lives of people and bringing dignity to the lives of those who suffer disadvantage. And so, any work that attempts to elevate the lives even of the disadvantaged, even of the most vulnerable, any work that attempts to do that must really relate itself to the soul of a government. But that is commendation. I want to caution the minister that while these noble objectives are pursued, there still may be people purporting to do social work in the name of the government. And I ask this minister to be very careful, to distance himself from persons who purport to be doing social and community work in the name of the government, and doing that while visiting abuse on people. And that abuse is in the form of giving publicity to people who are in the grips of infirmity. I don't mind saying in this forum that in the last few days, high publicity was given to a lady in her infirmity. And while it was not officially done in the name of this ministry, and I have no doubt that it was not done in the name of this ministry. I want to say, I admit it was not done in the name of this ministry, except that those agents of indignity purported that they were acting on behalf of the government. That is a fact. And I know that this minister will take the first opportunity to distance himself from that most undignified and callous act of bringing publicity to a lady in her infirmity for the sake of political advantage. That she became a victim of those who purport to be doing social and community work. The good book speaks of the voice of Jacob and the hand of Esau. I say to you, minister, through you, sir, that it is quite possible that what they said in pursuit of what they did, the dastardly act that they committed, they claim that they did it on the instruction of persons higher than yourself. And this must be said in this place. That lady's infirmity, the act committed against that lady, must be mentioned in rescuing her, in attempting to rescue her from these interveners. This place is not too good a place to bring attention to it, minister. I know you. I know you personally, and I know you officially. I know you in your official capacity. I've heard your many speeches before. I know your background. We know each other. And I know, minister, that you would want to take the first opportunity to distance yourself from that callous conduct committed by men who claim to be agents of this government. And if no one in this government chooses to distance himself or herself from that, they will be deemed to be complicit in the indignity that was visited on that lady's life. I will not call her name. I will call her situation to public notice. Minister, I ask you at the appropriate time to distance yourself, to indicate that Jacob's voice was not yours and Esau's hands were not yours. You mentioned the word dignity, the work of your department with your staff, whom we all must respect, must remain concerned with that of dignity, bringing dignity into the lives of the people of this country. It is one of the facts of the life of your work that money has to be the means towards social development. And I've listened to you carefully. And you've indicated quite correctly that money is the means and not the end. It is not only about money, except that it is about elevating lives to a place of social development. And so if money is the means, there must be a policy of social care. And not only must money be used in the work of this ministry, but I want to humbly suggest that certainly in terms of looking after the elderly, I don't know what is the precise program that your ministry pursues, but one wants to see a Barbados in which our elderly, as long as they're able to traverse the doors of their houses, that they can enjoy this beautiful country like the rest of us. The boardwalk, both in Christchurch, and the Honourable member for St. Peter wants me to say the jetty in St. Peter, Farley Hill, Gun Hill, that our elderly who are not of privilege can share these vistas with the rest of us in Barbados. Again, unhappily I go back to last week's ugly, obscene incident. That they must not be reduced to adverse publicity, of adverse circumstances of sometimes destitution. And we as politicians breach a public responsibility and a personal responsibility to the underprivileged when we take them before the television cameras and to the pages of the newspapers and to social media and to believe that we are doing God's work. That is the devil's work. When we bring high publicity to people in circumstances of abject poverty. So let us not only elevate them by injections of money into their lives, but let us show that we genuinely care for them. And I repeat, take them across this beautiful country that sometimes only the tourists enjoy, but our old people are entitled to the comforts and the beauty of this country. Minister, I commend your manifesto that you've read here this morning. I commend the work that your ministry is doing. I commend the effort to transform that work from mere welfare, from mere financial work, but to transform that work to an expression of human compassion in which we treat our elderly as human beings, as persons who we recognize made the sacrifice for us. And had they not made that sacrifice, Minister, through you, sir, you nor I, nor the minister, nor his team would be present in this place this morning. It is a debt that we owe not only to this country, but particularly to the elderly of this country. And who in here will forget the children? I always say the children didn't invite themselves into our lives, we brought them here. And my concern always relates to those two vulnerable groups. And if a government remains compassionate, it focuses much of its activities on the elderly and on the children of this country. Minister, I commend you for the new trust in the work of this ministry. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member, for your comments, sir. They are appreciated, of course. I must say, in the concept of dignity for me, you know, my election slogan, everybody knows, people over politics. I've been very focused on people, the ministry very focused on people and on dignity. And sometimes persons in the political space do things, perhaps for political mileage, that is difficult to understand. Things that I myself may never do, things that many members I know on our side won't do, and things that you may not do. But I've seen, sir, in the recent past, every single week, this is not only a political thing, every single week in the newspaper, on social media, professional journalists, and I don't have anything against the journalists because most of them and myself enjoy a very decent relationship, but it is the order of the day. Publishing very crude photos and details of persons, perhaps for sale of a newspaper. I saw, since I've been minister, persons go into town, video 2 persons with disabilities, make statements about those persons with disabilities, and circulate it. Not necessarily on our side, but done for political mileage. I've seen more recently a video by a man who I know for sure is not on our side, and speaking to a lady whose fortunes, regrettably, have now left her in a place where the government is working to remove her from, but using that again for political mileage, not on our side. It is regrettable that that has become the way, I think, the order of the day, sir, for many in public life. I believe that we've tried to hold ourselves to a standard, individually and collectively, all of us have tried to hold ourselves to a standard, to conduct ourselves with dignity, to move with probity in the affairs of people. And where there are, I think, clear attempts by people who are on our side to do otherwise, I know that they are called to account for that behavior. I would like to think that the same will be said of the other side, because that has become the behavior, regrettably, a lot of the times, of the behavior of the other side. These professional institutions, sir, who do it, I will use this opportunity to caution that it also makes it, and this is real, it makes it very difficult. If you go and you put a person in the newspaper whose house is in a deplorable condition, you say she's been a horrible tenant, this person has been, when we try to find housing for that person who was in the paper or on the news in some other fashion, and persons say, is this the person that was recently on social media? They don't want to house them. And so for your own personal ego or self-aggrandizement, you make these things, you make it difficult for us to be able to help. I would obviously want to call on people who do those kind of things to cease. But human development, sir, is about choice. If you choose on your own volition to go to the newspaper, you make that choice, not coerced. That's your choice. That's part of your human development. You make that choice as a person. There's nothing I can say about it. If a person decides that they feel offended by some act and they go to the press and they speak on it out of their own volition, not coerced, that's a matter for them. It is where they are coerced into doing something, offered something, that it becomes problematic. And a lot of these cases, sir, that I know for sure on the other side, are people trying to do that. I cannot say that I know exactly of the instance of which the Honourable Member is speaking, but I do know if anyone were to do that, to cause somebody to lose dignity for political advantage, I wouldn't have to dissociate myself in a foreign place. I would do it here. I do not support that. But if you do it of your own free will because something has offended you and you go to the press, that is your choice, Barbara. This is a free society, regardless of what people are trying to say about it. Right now, you are free to speak in this country. But I do believe people have to be treated with dignity. That is why we have the program, sir. And allow my head of national assistance to speak, because I think the Honourable Member also said he wasn't aware of some of the programs we were doing for the elderly, and I would wish that she would share some of those programs.
Pauline Walcott, Director at the National Assistance Board. So I'm very pleased to hear that one of the main themes coming out this morning is the whole issue of dignity. It is one of the things very much which underscores our mission statement to maintain the dignity of older persons in the community where our work is focused primarily. So our major programs, in response to the question, first, most persons will know the home care service. The philosophy of our programs is to put services into the community, into the homes of persons, and for the most part, our response is that once you make a referral to us, you do not necessarily have to come to us. We go to you, we take the service to you. So apart from the home care program, we have the new program since 2020, the community elder care program, home care program carrying some 144 workers on the ground. The community elder care program, 420 persons on the ground. Apart from that, we would have heard the whole issue of recreation and inclusion and exposing them to social stimulation. And we also have the seniors recreational program where we use borrowed buildings, whether it's churches, community centers, and older persons come to those centers in a relatively safe space where they engage in social and stimulating activity. Housing and accommodation is a very, very basic need, and therefore we have the Vauxhall Senior Citizens Village, which was recently renovated. And we also have the Lancaster House, Vauxhall Senior Citizens being a residential facility long-term, Lancaster House being transitional if you're displaced, and then we work with you with social work intervention to get you back into the community. We also have the Clyde Gallup Shelter for Homeless Men. We're so aware of the issue of homelessness, primarily among men. That facility at this time accommodates some 34 homeless persons. A key part of our program really is our social work section, though small, where a lot of our referrals and interventions and assessments are done. And primarily we address the whole issue of elder abuse or any other issue or need which may be referred to the agency for our intervention. So we look really at a continuum of services in people's home. So then we have reviewed our services. We realized that the home care service just would give the activities of daily living. There haven't been a request based on our client satisfaction survey for other range of services, and therefore to that, we have added the physiotherapists and our nurses as well. So our aim really, and we continue to review going forward, we would look at the whole question of daycare. We do have one facility which we had to put into other uses. We hope to, from April, to resume our daycare services. But in essence, is to take services to people where they are to maintain their dignity.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, Minister, let me commend you for the tremendous work that you're doing in the ministry. It is absolutely clear how important the ministry is and how important it is to the lives of the people in Barbados, especially the vulnerable people who often cannot help themselves. Minister, you know I have certain concerns, and the first one, I believe I've made reference to it before in a previous estimates, and it relates to many times constituents approach us as members of Parliament. I'm sure you get approached many times as well, saying that they have been to the welfare department because they're asking for rental assistance. And I see in your estimates that you provide significant numbers of money in rental assistance. However, oftentimes they're asked, they said, the welfare department will say that yes, we can provide rental assistance. However, you need to go and find a landlord that's prepared to take the money from the government, the welfare department. and they often have difficulty because you oftentimes get many landlords who are not prepared to sign on to the program to be able to take that, to assist those people, those vulnerable people, and to get that assistance in terms of housing. What innovations has the ministry taken to address this problem, which is a clear problem that we have people who are seeking to be housed. We have a ministry who is willing to assist to get those people housed, but yet still we have landlords who are not prepared to take on that responsibility for those people. That's my first question.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I will speak and then ask Mr. Pollard perhaps to fill in the many gaps I'm sure he will leave. As you said, sir, in the estimates, it is clear that we've put significant funds toward rent. And the reason for that is simply that there are persons who, from time to time, are caught in a situation where they need rentals. Previously, it used to be primarily fires or another shock, external exogenous shock. Within recent times, there's been, in my opinion, and this may not be the opinion of those who speak after me, but in my opinion, certainly we've seen a lot of breakdown in family relationships. I think there's a post-COVID social presentation that we probably, across the world, didn't prepare for. People's capacity to deal with other people is just gone. And so we've seen an increase in people requiring rentals. The Welfare Department, as you know, is a social work agency. It was not created to go out and look for houses to be able to offer people. But given the request, the Welfare Department often found themselves having to go and seek rentals. And that is why they would say, if you find a house, we pay the rent. Previously, as a matter of fact, when I was in the ministry, I joined this ministry in 2002. I've been in this ministry a long time as a manager of childcare, then as a director. But what used to be the case is that people would come already with rentals, and welfare would just have to pay the rent. That evolved over time to welfare having to find the houses. And then the government recently, rightfully, has asked for persons to produce TAMIS identification, so that if you're receiving these monies, it is tracked in the system. That took a lot of people out of the system immediately. There was also a case where some persons there's an underground economy that we have to be cognizant of in Barbados, where a person might own a house passed on by his grandmother, but never had a paper to prove he owns the house. But now where you have to prove ownership of the house, it becomes difficult to be able to rent that house to the government. Again, moving a number of our rentals from out of the government. And so we recognize that became a growing concern in terms of our capacity to be able to offer rents. The other thing is that person says the money we were paying was too low. We were averaging around $800 or so, sometimes $1,000. And the rents, because we took a lot of the other houses out of commission, we're now talking about houses $1,200, $1,500 and up. And then the reality is, and we don't often talk about it, my staff surely they don't talk about it, but the reality is there are many people who just do not wish to rent to welfare clients. Our clients who find themselves before a social service agency. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition spoke about the name welfare, and I will repeat that. We have now worked toward creating a family services authority. So welfare in name won't exist, but you could change the name of the road and it'd be the same street. So we're changing the street in terms of how we do business, but the Welfare Department as a name won't exist, and the way we do business has to change. So it would be a case where people would say, oh, you're from the Welfare Department, you have children, I'm not renting you my house. It just became very difficult. And so we created in the ministry, and this is why Mr. Pollard will speak on it, we created very recently in the ministry a resilience and reintegration unit whose sole purpose is to be able to respond to those shocks, to help people find housing where there have been fires, where there have been some kind of an unexpected disaster, like we saw after Elsa, if there's been ashfall, anything. We created a department that allows us to be able to respond to those things. It is supposed to be a 24-hour response system. Mr. Pollard could go into more details. And also to address, for the first time in government, the issues of homelessness. To be able to say that we've offered a serious response. We have a social policy coming now on homelessness, which will soon be followed by some legislation. as well. And this unit would allow us to respond effectively to the issues that are facing this country. But I think Mr. Pollard is better suited to talk to some of these issues. Mr. Pollard.
Good morning to everyone. Andrew Pollard, Coordinator at present Poverty Alleviation and Reduction Program. As Minister mentioned, we are about to launch the Resilience and Reintegration Unit. So the Poverty Alleviation and Reduction Program will become the Resilience and Reintegration Unit. Speaking specifically to the question the Honourable Member raised, yes, we recognize that over the years, persons have been more or less averse to working with the welfare department in terms of rent, and also because of the particular way in which the persons can access rent through the welfare department, which is, as the Honourable Member said, the persons have to go and look for a house and a landlord that would cooperate with the welfare department. Overall though, and there's been a challenge where persons have had the impression for one reason or next that government doesn't pay. The Resilience and Reintegration Unit, now we are moving to more or less dissipate those charges. And what we have decided we would do is we would look for the house. So that immediately removes a burden from the potential beneficiary. But not only that, we will offer to pay the utilities. So the utilities will be included in the rent persons will pay. We feel pretty much and that system will work well in terms of persons accessing rent houses. We are doing it right now under the Poverty Alleviation Reduction Program, and to a large extent, we would say it is successful. Anecdotally, we have one or two landlords who have set aside their house to be rented by the Poverty Alleviation and Reduction Program. They recognize that there is integrity in our dealings with them, and that is not to suggest that there hasn't been integrity before. When we highlight the challenges the welfare department would have, but they recognize that they can more rely on working with us, and so we found that that has worked well. And we continue to try to look for more houses, but as you would appreciate, honorable members, the need is great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I didn't hear either you or Mr. Pollard mention. I think I saw an ad somewhere. And this is not my second question. This is just an addendum to it. I saw an ad somewhere that I thought that would have assisted you. And it was that, because when I speak to other people, because from time to time I do go to and ask other landlords were they prepared to rent to a constituent because they're having difficulty after a house fire or whatever it may be. And the feedback that I often got is that you have to wait too long. Not that government doesn't pay, is that you have to wait too long. And what I thought was very innovative was the ad that I saw that the ministry was prepared to pay 3 times the rent as a deposit. And I don't know if I'm mistaken in seeing that ad or if that is in fact part, but I thought that that was very innovative, and it would encourage more landlords to get on to the program, to be able to assist people who are otherwise vulnerable. Because if the landlords are saying that they have to wait too long, and you can increase the deposit to minimize the exposure that they have, then that is something that I thought would have been admirable. But that is not my second question, Mr. Chairman. I hope that maybe the minister could expound on it when he comes to answer. My second question has to do with another very important program, and that is the Care of the Elderly program. And it is very commendable, all the reports coming all the reports coming back from the beneficiaries is that it is an excellent program. The numbers of people you have are obviously benefiting not only the beneficiaries, but also the people who are getting an opportunity to provide a service for those people. And I wonder if you could expand and if there's any plans within the ministry to take that program even further, offer more services, and hopefully offer more people an opportunity to be employed in that program.
The Director of the National Assistance Board.
Thank you for the question, and I will certainly convey your sentiments to the workers. So yes, the program, as I said before, the program has been up since 2020. Obviously, there's ongoing review and evaluation, and there are more demands for the service. When the service started, the optimum number of persons, we were thinking at least 2 persons per day. What we are finding, though, is that if we're talking about people-centered and elderly-centered, then you have to focus the person's needs, and therefore, in cases with persons with dementia who need more supervision, obviously you have to put in a worker for the entire day to give that supervision and to give some support to families. So even though we think of expansion in terms of numbers, we also have to think of expansion in terms of services. Is there anything that these persons can do? And come April, we'll be rolling out training for every single one of those caregivers in terms of even in the home care program as well, and not focusing so much on the technical skills that will be a part of it, but also on the relational skills so that they can interact and make a difference in those persons' lives. So yes, while we think of expansion in terms of numbers, expansion in terms of services as older persons and their families identify various needs and gaps and deficits in the program.
Former Minister Ford, I think, should also be in a position to offer some, if I'm pretty sure, value on this. And then to close off, Mr. George Griffith.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, everyone. The Elder Care Companion Project is being highly commended by those persons in Barbados who receive it. The concept at the beginning was to provide services for those persons, particularly those who live alone. We have a lot of seniors who live alone. They become very, very lonely. They just want somebody to cheer them up, give them a kind word, pray with them, take them for a walk around the house, pull a few weeds from the gardens, and so on. And that is really the concept of the project. At present, it is extremely popular. Almost every day people are coming and asking because the work of the Elder Care Companion helps to support that of the National Assistance Board. And there is a dividing line there where those members are not assigned to carry out the duties of the National Assistance Board members because they have to have that kind of special training and certification from the National Assistance Board in order for them to do it. And so the seniors are asking for help. We have provided that help with those couple hundred persons, but there's still a long way to go because we are living in an aging society. And if we are saying that there are so many persons above 60 years, 18% I believe it is, according to the note, and there are so many people who are lonely because living alone is not an easy thing. And because we are this aging society where we are perhaps second in the world after Japan, then it says that as we go forward, our seniors are getting older, we're not producing more children, as we all know, and therefore we need that kind of support system. The only other comment I will wish to make is the fact that it has been so well received that I think it is important that we continue to do further training for those companions because it will make a glass of lemonade, as I said, and I mentioned some of the things they can do. But unless the training takes place, that they too, within the communities, get the necessary training, which we've already started. The Community Development Department has started it. There are a couple other programs that we've started in communities to sensitize residents so that they can get the training. And an extension to that is that we've already sought the assistance of the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute to be able to give community training to a number of persons on a regular basis, at least for a 3-month period or so, on evenings in the school, in a community center, wherever, so that those persons too can get the training, and then they will be selected, those who are the best of them, by the Barbados Community College to be able to make the difference. We know that the elder care companions are not to change the clothing, they're not to bathe, they're not to do the fixing of bruises or cuts or bed sores or whatever, and because that demarcation line is there, they well understand what their roles are. And it is such a popular program, Mr. Chairman and colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. It is such a popular program that almost every day people are asking, can I get into it? It is just that we need to continue the ongoing training so that those persons get a better understanding, and wherever possible, that the government can extend it and include families in particular, because most of those seniors have family members who perhaps are working in the day and they're getting the support. But if the families do not understand their role, it makes it even more difficult. The loneliness kicks in, the abuse kicks in, and so on. So I want to commend the government for this project, and I want to invite all other persons to become volunteers as well. It is not always about money, because some of those seniors are the godparents, godmother, godfather, distant relative, friends from the churches, friends from the community groups that they were part of, and so to go in and tithe their time. It's not always about money, because none of us knows how long we will live and the kind of service that we will require if we train and expand the project, not necessarily for payment, but payment, of course, will be for those persons in particular who need the resources, because they too have families that they have to look after. And I just want to indicate, finally, it is also very important that we get some males to come on board, because men are on the periphery, and there are males who are there who really require the help, but because of the intricacies of their relationships, and some of them might be a little amazed at females working with them, I can imagine it's causing some challenges. Plus, conversations with men to men is not the same as conversation with women and men all the time. Some of them just want to go down memory lane when they played dominoes in the village, when they were able to cut canes together, when they were driving the buses and so on. The conversations are not always the same. And so I highly recommend that the government will continue to work towards this project, and that we continue in our department with the elderly department, that we continue to reach into the communities and sensitize persons that they can go and volunteer their time to be able to make a difference in the lives of those individuals who are generally living alone, but just need that kind of stimulation to be able to keep them abreast of what is happening. And of course, the National Assistance Board's program is highly recommended for Barbadians as well. And I can't leave out Q in the community, where so many thousands of seniors go out because they know that the environments they're in, they're going to meet old school friends, old co-workers, and they're going to have a good time and not have to worry about the bang, bang, boom, bam music and so on that will impact on them, and that they don't have to be afraid, because there will be mostly people of the same general age ranges that will be able to meet and talk about school days and the old time days and things of that nature. So I want to highly commend those persons as well, and the ministry for the concept that has been developed. And I understand that down in the Caribbean islands, they have been promoting it. They've had some activities that they're looking towards implementing a similar program, because at the end of the day, seniors are our nation builders, and they too must be looked after in their twilight years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I beg your indulgence to allow Mr. George Griffith just to speak very briefly on the program.
Thank you very much, Minister, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words about the Community Elder Care Program.
Officer, could you please state your name?
Yes, sir. I must not forget my name. I'm George Griffith. I'm the coordinator of the Community Elder Care Program. Thank you very much. I'm grateful for the opportunity to say a few words about this program, which is now 3 years old and has been considerably successful given the realities of our times. And I would like to mention, first of all, the goal of the program and 3 short objectives, which would put into sharp focus the philosophy of this program. The goal is to strengthen the rights, welfare, and dignity of older and vulnerable persons in Barbados through the provision of enhanced social care. And the 3 objectives are: 1, to provide a comprehensive program of personal support for the elderly and vulnerable persons in their homes. Secondly, to provide a client-focused approach in support of the independent living of the elderly and other vulnerable persons. And lastly, to provide a complementary array of social services in support of those services provided by the Home Health/Home Care Program of the National Assistance Board. Now, I am happy to say that since this program was started, the numbers have grown rapidly, reaching as high as 951 persons. Currently, it is less than 951 because there's some fluctuation in the numbers. But with 420 persons at our disposal, and as mentioned by the Director of the National Assistance Board, there is an increasing demand, especially as it relates to the fact that 1 in every 3 persons seeking admission to the program is afflicted with dementia. Now that means that the caregiver is required to spend considerably more time with that client than with the average person who is merely old age or just vulnerable. And this has put a tremendous strain on us really to service persons at the level that we wish. So going forward, I think that we have to pay special attention to the fact that dementia seems to be growing in Barbados, and for the benefit of the client, but as well the family members who have to go out to work and leave those clients. They're not comfortable simply because such clients can be difficult. They can walk away from home. And if we are only providing sometimes 4 hours per day, then that places them in a very serious predicament. But I want to say that this year, come April, the training program becomes more comprehensive. And we anticipate that before the end of the year, all 420 persons will be trained, and that this training will be repeated over time, simply because we have to respond to the dynamics of issues pertaining to the elderly in Barbados. Now, sometimes we do not recognize that the persons working in this program are required to walk from house to house, sometimes in the hot sun, sometimes in the rain, in order to provide this service. And therefore, we appreciate very much the assistance that they are provided, the service that they are provided. And I have no doubt that in time to come, the public will become very appreciative of the significant contribution our workers are making to the quality of life of persons across the length and breadth of Barbados.
Thank you very much. And then very quickly, sir, because the Honourable Member had raised it when he first spoke in relation to the rent, I just want to make it clear that the position of the government now is that if persons are willing to rent to us, we are prepared to offer 3 months rent up front to allow that person to have the comfort of knowing that the monies will be there up front, and to ensure that monthly thereafter, that person will be receiving their rents on time. The ministry is very serious about finding new landlords who are willing to enter into this relationship. That is why we ran the ad, sir, to encourage people to come forward. And so I want to use this opportunity to encourage landlords to come forward, to be able to play their part in delivering proper social services and social programming to those in need who need it. We will offer the monies up front. We also give the commitment that we will be working with the persons who are in their household to guarantee that they do not destroy their houses or that they cause the houses to lose value in a partnership. So I really want to use this opportunity just to encourage persons to come forward and to rent. 3 months rent up front.
Honourable Member Christchurch West, your final question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Minister. And I just want to commend you on that very, very bold step. I believe that then once landlords have the understanding that they'll be front-loaded in their deposit, that in terms of the 3 months rent up front, that that fear of having to wait for extended periods of time to get reimbursed for their rent, when they have commitments, mortgages and utilities and so on, is commendable. And I hope that many of the landlords across Barbados would take up that opportunity to be able to offer their facilities and enhance the accommodations and the range of accommodation available to you for vulnerable persons. My last question, Minister, has to do with the 1,000 Family Program. And clearly, I know that as you went through all of the departments, you came to the end and didn't have a chance to expand on the 1,000 Family Program as time did not permit. Clearly, this is a new, innovative, and excellent program, again, for vulnerable people. And I know the people that I've interacted with who are on the program are very excited and look forward to seeing the program fully rolled out in time. And I would ask now if you could expand for the benefit of the Honourable Chamber on the 1,000 Family Program and what expectations and what goals you then see coming from that program and what deliverables you would expect for that program to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for this opportunity. You were right, it came at the very end of my presentation. I didn't want to overstep. I'm concerned I'd already overstepped my time. So I would allow Ms. Daniel, who's the coordinator of that program, to speak to the program, but I feel I need to offer a clarification up front. Not to you, but in relation to what I'm hearing coming from the other side. The 1,000 Family Program is a program where we are offering support to 1,000 of the most vulnerable families in Barbados. Chosen not by myself, not by yourself, but chosen, a lot of them coming from the original welfare list and other persons who said these are people who are vulnerable. In fact, sir, there's a score sheet that determines the level of deprivation, and persons are chosen according to that level of deprivation. No political interference. I've heard, though, regrettably, that persons seem to think that this program, and people are trying to claim the program and making it a political program. I have tried my best to keep politics out of the affairs of the ministry. In fact, it is true that when we were discussing this program and other programs in the ministry, I invited all of the former ministers to a meeting to discuss these programs, to look at how we can build something that makes sense for Barbados, not for the Barbados Labour Party or the Democratic Labour Party, but for Barbados. And Dr. Lowe, who was one of the persons involved in the original 250 program, came to that meeting. Hampton Lashley came, Trevor Preissel came, Minister Ford came. We had a very good day, and we discussed this thing above politics. But there is a view constantly being put out there that this program, in an attempt to make it political and to claim it, is a DLP program. I have no interest in the politics of it, but I feel I have to put clarification on the ground for the record. The 1,000 Family Program is built on a program, sir, that was done called the IC Bridge Program, which used 250 persons to be able to take those persons out of poverty. IC means identification, stabilization, enablement, and empowerment. That 250 program was a program that Dr. Lowe, when he was minister, and I was director of social policy, that was a program that we brought forward and took to the IDB. The 1,000 Family built on that. However, that IDB program came from a program that the Labour Party has started. When we were looking at the Puente model, it's a Chilean model that sought to integrate all of government social services to be able to deliver the best of social services to the person who needed it most. We would have seen, we had these conversations in 2004, 2005, 2006. We had a poverty bureau, sir, that was mandated to look at this program. So what indeed happened, because I was in the room, what indeed happened was that we took this program, built around the Puente model. Anybody could Google it and see it's true. Built around the Puente model, we were about to approach them for the support to deliver the model when the governments changed. But it was built on this framework from 2004 to 2005, 2006. The IC Bridge program came from that original preventive model that we had put the framework in place in 2004, 2005. It is not a DLP program. Regrettably, I don't feel that I should have to explain whether it's a DLP program or a BLP program because it is a program for the people. But the Democratic Labour Party seems hell-bent on trying to claim the program. And I feel that we have to set this record straight. And so for those who want to call in program very recently misinforming the public, rather out of their own ignorance or deliberately, I just felt the need to clarify it. Now, the tenets of the program, I will ask Ms. Daniel to speak on because it is a really, really good program for the people of Barbados. So I will ask Ms. Nicole Daniel, who's coordinated the program, to speak on it, please.
Hi, good morning. Nicole Daniel, Social Development Project Manager for the One Family Program. Thank you, Honourable Member, and thank you, Minister, for the brief introduction as it relates to the One Family Program. Now, the program is a very holistic and transformative program. It seeks to move away and provide a transformative shift and a paradigm shift away from the welfare system. So the welfare system, you know, if you need some assistance, if you need food, you would go to the welfare department and you would ask for assistance with food. But we are going a little bit deeper in our program. So we want to find out from persons, why is it that you need food? Is it that you need food because you don't have employment? And then if you don't have employment, why don't you have employment? Do you need additional educational skills? Do you need some level to provide greater employment opportunities for you? So the program, as I said, is very holistic. We meet the families where they are at. So we currently have 50 social workers who work with 20 families each. And through this program, we definitely will be providing genuine care. So we want to ensure that the families get the support that they need because oftentimes persons just need some guidance. They don't know where to turn, they don't know how they can get this particular assistance. So the social worker works with them hand in hand. Now, the program is founded on the IC Bridge model, which stands, as a minister would have indicated, identification, and we have identified these 1,000 families through the eligibility score sheet. We would have assessed over 2,500 of these families and selected the most vulnerable 1,000 families. The program has 6 key pillars. The first pillar is personal identification, where we seek to ensure that each of these families and the members of these families have the requisite identification. Now, we all know that in order to access any social services across Barbados, that you need the relevant identification. So we work with the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, we work with Registration Department to ensure that the clients get the necessary identification. Another pillar would be education and human resource development. Now, education is very key to moving a person out of poverty. So what we do, or we ensure, we've partnered with a lot of educational institutions to provide that level of education where they can develop personally and be able to be in a position to have greater skills and, become more employable. The human resource development side of it, of course, we have to ensure that persons have the requisite CV writing, interview techniques, so that their opportunity when they actually go into the world of work or looking for opportunities with regards to work, that they have a better chance to land a job. Another pillar would be the health promotion. Now, our population of vulnerable persons have a lot of NCDs. And what we want to do is have them to have greater access to greater health opportunities and promotion. And we want to make sure that they eat better. We know that their budget is quite tight, but we still want to make sure that they eat right. We are partnering with a number of organizations where we want to actually start a backyard gardening project for persons to, just a half can, nothing too big, but to help for them to be a little bit more self-sufficient. One of our key things, another pillar would be family dynamics. And the family dynamics pillar of this program really depends on the mindsets of clients. And mindsets is very important because what we have found is that, you can't just change overnight. You need a lot of interventions, you need some assistance, you need counseling, you need the right tools in order to move. We will be providing the necessary tools along the way to help enable these clients for them to move from a stage of dependency on the system to a stage more of independence and then interdependence. So the mindset of these families is going to be one of our critical things that we will be doing throughout the ARM program, because we have to recognize our value system, our family value system. And we have seen a lot of dysfunction within our families, and we want to help, with the development of this particular area. Then we have housing, and I know we spoke about housing and having the reintegration and resilience unit, but a lot of our clients, what we have found now from those 1,000 families, have a lot of poor housing conditions. And while this project is a community project, and we work closely with the Ministry of Housing, RDC, UDC, National Housing, what we need to do also is to also reach out to our community groups, to construction companies, to help in this endeavor, because we know that government can't do it alone. Another pillar would be key, would be employment. The employment pillar, obviously, for most persons, when we think of poverty, we see poverty as persons not having a job or not having the income necessary coming into that household. So for the employment element of it, we want to ensure persons get the relevant skills. We have, as I said, upcoming on Friday, we actually have a resume writing workshop for some of our clients, and then the following Thursday, then we will have some interview techniques workshops with the said clients. One and final pillar would be the income and social benefits pillar. Now, the income and social benefits pillar is more so for the stabilization part of this program. And this is where we currently are in the program of the ISEE. We've identified the families. We are now in the process of doing the stabilization. So we are doing more or less needs assessments. We need to find out what are the needs of the clients. We recently, over the last 2 weeks, would have met with the 1,000 families through an orientation process. And this orientation process was to provide some insight on what is required from both the families and from the social workers inclusive in this program. And what we have found, or what we have highlighted, is that the program is a partnership program and not a promise-ship program, where we don't give. We also try to assist persons and help them as best as we can. So we always say, you can give a man a fish, or you can teach a man a fish. But we also have to look at it as well, where we also have to provide the tools for that person to fish. And while we also say that, I come back to mindset again, because that person also has to want to fish, right? So right now, we are at the stage where we are meeting with the, more engrossed with the families, doing some comprehensive reviews, finding out what it is that they need. As I said, most of our concerns that we have seen from these assessments would be poor housing conditions, high levels of unemployment, need for educational opportunities, and then there's also the breakdown in family relationships. So what we are going to proceed during the next weeks, during the next financial year, is offer programs in parenting, programs in self-esteem and motivation, programs, and we've joined with the National Financial Literacy Program, where we teach them, about the skills as it relates to budgeting, etc. When it comes to employment, as I said, with the 2 workshops that we have coming up, we get persons with the CV, and we're going to work with the private sector, as well as the Barbados Chamber of Commerce, to see if they have employment opportunities to offer some of our clients. And what is good about the program as well, because they work one-on-one with a social worker, The social worker can always check up on them, find out if they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. As I said, we meet them where they're at.
Officer,
Once-
I will meet you where you're at right now. You have
Yes.
exceeded your time.
Okay,
Wrap up quickly.
right.
You will have other opportunities, I'm sure.
Okay, right, thank you. But as I said, once we are in a position to provide relevant assistance, we are here to assist as best as we can.
Thank you very much, Minister and Officer. Clearly very expansive, and obviously you're doing fantastic work in the ministry and for the people of Barbados. And that is exactly where you're doing the work. And irrespective of what people say in the public domain, let that not distract you. The people are the beneficiaries that you're working towards. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
I thank you, Honourable Chairman. I first wish to commend this minister and his technocrats for the tremendous job they've been doing in trying to fulfill their strategic goals, which the ministry has as its primary focus to alleviate or eradicate intergenerational poverty in the short and medium term, and the elimination of poverty in the long term, thereby contributing to the overall socio-economic development of Barbados. And this has to be one of the primary goals of any government, to try to eliminate this intergenerational poverty that the vast majority of our people, those who are black descendants of slaves, found ourselves in from pre-colonial times. I wish to speak towards the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, his challenge to honourable members, and to say that a few months ago, in fact, they had a video circulating by someone who was a self-confessed and professed agent of the political party of which he now finds himself as political leader, over a constituent of mine that I found was extremely deplorable and despicable. And I would trust that he would use his office now as the political leader of that political party to condemn those kind of acts. Wish to speak, Honourable Chairman, in terms of sub-program 423 programs, or rather program 423, sub-programs 435 and 440 of this head, and to, which deals with disabilities, sir, and to again commend this ministry for the work it has done in advancing the lives of people with disabilities over the last 2 years with the formation and establishment of the committee of which I had the honor to chair. And to Sir, of course, with your permission, because 3 of the other members of that committee are here in our presence, sir, and since I'm speaking to them in a positive way, because I believe praise is due, they've been praised by me and others before this Parliament, but in their presence, sir, we have, as part of this ministry's effort today, the Most Honourable Kerry Ann Eiffel, FB, proud recipient of the highest national honour after National Hero in last year's independence, who was deputy chairman of that committee, sir. Senator in the other place, Andreli Boyce, and Ms. Janelle Odell, the first blind attorney at law in this country. Praise could never be so high for them in the efforts they made. So I want to give Minister, you and your officers, the opportunity to speak in terms of the implementation of the policy to improve the lives of persons with disability, the national policy, which was accepted and approved by Cabinet on the 21st of September last year. And give you the opportunity to inform the public, and in particular, those persons with disabilities and their caregivers through this House as to how this national policy, which is a 7-year policy, 2023 to 2030, would be implemented, sir, because the important thing now is to get what is a comprehensive policy, sir, and I have to mention to crafted with the assistance as well of Professor Drain Devenish of the University of the West Indies, but how to get this commendable comprehensive policy off of the paper into reality so that people with disabilities will see real improvement in their lives over the next 7 years. In the short term, because they're short-term goals, medium term and long term. Thank you, Honourable Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think I would want to, just before I speak to where we're going with the policy, to ask the Most Honourable Carrie-Ann Eiffel, who would have been Deputy Chair of that committee. First of all, let me just thank you, Honourable Member, for your sterling chairmanship of that particular committee and for the 60+ meetings you held across Barbados. But I think before I discuss what the plans are in relation to what was designed and developed by your team, I think it would be fitting for the Most Honourable Carrie-Ann Eiffel, Deputy Chair of that committee, perhaps to speak to the meetings, perhaps to speak to the process or the policy itself, but to give some further edification to the Barbadian public about the policy before I speak after about where we are and where we're going to go with it, sir.
Good morning. Sir, having served as Deputy Chair of the National Committee to Improve the Lives of Persons with Disabilities.
Officer, before you proceed, just state your name and your position for the record, just a reminder.
My name is Carrie-Ann Eiffel, and I served as Deputy Chair of the National Committee for the Improvement of Lives of Persons with Disabilities, and I'm currently consultant with the National Disabilities Unit for the Technology Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
You may proceed.
Sir, over the 9 months for which the committee did our work, the Minister has already spoken to the 60+ meetings, the several public engagements, the town hall meetings, the consultations, very wide consultations with the community of persons with disabilities, the work of the consultant in pulling the policy together in a timely manner. I think this committee must be commended for having delivered its mandate within the time frame it was given. That was no mean feat. Our chair set a grueling pace, setting meetings with relevant authorities. We spoke with persons from every sector of Barbadian life. We touched on all the pillars that form the backdrop to the lives of persons with disabilities. And so the eventual policy, which spans 2023 to 2030, has resulted in a document and a drafting which represents the needs and the abilities of the community of which I am proud to be a part. This policy consulted within the NGO sector extremely closely, as well as in our several town hall meetings. Some were concluded before the 9-month mandate, and then the policy, once it had been completed, was once again returned to the public for further consultation. We collected much data, largely from the community of the parents of persons with disabilities, which spoke to the need for improvements in inclusive education, housing especially, and eventual employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. The policy rolled out will address such areas, in addition to the need for improved transportation. There are several consultations still ongoing to alleviate challenges in this area. There's also representation for the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the wider digital space and our needs being addressed to this end. In addition to all of that, it was one of the first times that persons with disabilities have had so extensive an opportunity to not only air their concerns, but to bring work that has been done. We had presentations from persons who are concerned in the matter of climate change and how it impacts the lives of persons with disabilities. One of the most vigorous presentations was done from the community of persons on the autism spectrum and their caregivers as to the still ongoing challenges they face, as well as the deaf and hearing impaired community, and all other communities of persons with disabilities. The extensive policy, which is represented in over 170 pages, speaks to 10 areas: access to the built environment, among others. Over the years, we've seen improvements in this area with persons working towards a more inclusive approach to presenting their built environment. But still, it is not enough, and we still face many challenges when we seek to do our business in the wider space. It was my privilege over the time frame to sit on various panels, to engage with our fearless and tireless chair and the other persons. All 8 of us represented the community of persons with disabilities in a variety of ways. And that too is truly representative. 4 persons of the committee themselves had disabilities, and the other 4 had family members or were caregivers of persons with disabilities. Active teachers were also part of the consultation and the community. As I mentioned earlier, inclusive education is one of the areas that still remains of grave concern and is outlined and addressed clearly in the policy as to how we intend to go about achieving a new Barbados in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Nurse, the Deputy Director of the National Disabilities Unit.
All in all, being Nurse, Assistant Director, National Disabilities Unit, the national policy on disabilities is one of the achievements that we can speak about for the National Disabilities Unit. But I would like to first start with our vision statement. National Disability Unit, our vision statement is a fully inclusive Barbadian society that promotes the self-determination, dignity, and equality of all persons with disabilities in a way that empowers them to lead safe, productive, and fulfilling lives, careers, and destinies. So I can look basically at some of the areas that we focus on. Policy formulation. So which will be recommending policies and measures that ensures the protection of rights of persons with disabilities. We also focus on public awareness education, which will be sensitizing the public about issues relating to disabilities and persons with disabilities. We have campaigns about stereotypes, prejudices, harmful practices. We also focus on research and data collection. This is to ensure policies and programs are relevant and effective. Accessibility and personal disability aids and tools. The NDU promotes and monitors the accessibility of public spaces, ensuring that they are disability friendly. Not just physical infrastructure, but also information and communication systems. Provide accessibility modifications of private homes and residences of persons with disabilities. We offer a range of assistive devices and technology equipment. Focus on advocacy and collaboration. We work alongside NGOs, community-based organizations, international agencies, and so on to promote persons with disabilities. Look at skill development, recognizing the importance of economic independence, supporting vocational and skills development programs to persons with disabilities. have a support service. NDU provides range of support services, including counseling for persons with disabilities and their families. We can look basically at some of the achievements that we have done in the current year. As you would have just heard, we concluded the draft national policy on persons with disabilities, concluded the draft legislation to protect the rights of persons with disabilities. In terms of some of the work we would have done, 28 ramps were constructed. We distributed 58 wheelchairs and other assisted devices. We had the facilitation. We facilitated the provision of 10 prostheses to persons in need. Summer camp, the camp reached for 25 children with special needs in collaboration with the Ministry of Youth and Sports and Community Empowerment. I would just highlight some of the areas because there would have been a lot that we would have done within current year. We introduced training in flower arranging of 12 persons with disabilities who graduated in 2020. Introduced the training in sign language, and 18 persons graduated in 2020. First, $279,750 in subvention to 8 organizations. Provided information technology training for 24 visually impaired persons. Assisted 17 visually impaired persons to maneuver in their internal and external environments. We completed Barbados' first UN report to the UN Committee on the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities after signing in 2007.
All right, officer, you will complete your statement now.
Okay, so we have some major plans for the year. We were talking about in terms of employment and so on, we want to get into the AI training for persons with disabilities, and also training in agriculture at our mangrove project. This is in collaboration with the Barbados Workers Union. We also want to increase our transportation of persons with disabilities by acquiring 3 more buses. That's basically it. Thank you.
Yes, sir, to answer the question more directly in relation to what we intend to do with the policy, sir, this policy cannot be one that sits collecting dust. In fact, government is very good at doing a lot of this kind of work and leaving it just to gather dust. There have been lots of policies, green papers, white papers, that have gone nowhere. But as you heard from the Most Honourable Kariana, I feel that a lot of work has actually gone into this policy. And it is, I think, the most representative policy, both in terms of the structure of the committee as well as the meetings and so on. So we felt it was important that this policy be brought alive in terms of, first of all, the legislation. The legislation, drafting instructions for legislation also attended the cabinet when we sent the policy. So we know legislation is coming very soon. We hope to have that legislation before Parliament by June to begin a discussion and debate on a national set of legislation, sir, that speaks to empowering and protecting persons with disabilities, sir, and their rights. In terms of the day-to-day, following up on the policy, we've asked 2 persons to assist us in that process, Ms. Janelle, permit me to say, sir, Ms. Janelle Odell and Senator Andrea Boyce, to be our advocates, but to work around making sure that the policy doesn't just become something that sits there and doesn't materialize into anything. So their day-to-day work is to make sure that the policy becomes something. We will lay that policy in Parliament and have a debate on the policy. We will also lay the report from the committee and debate that as well. So just to keep the public informed about some of these things. This, sir, that is why I am struggling, to be precise with you, to be honest, with this idea that this work could be political. I don't see how it could be. And because, you know, disabilities, don't ask your parents if you're a B or a D. You know, when you go to the bank, they don't care if you're a B or a D. If you can't get a job, they don't care if you're a B or a D. This is so above politics. I would hate, and why I've tried to keep it so far from politics, I would hate to think that we do all of this work to watch it dismantled by another administration simply because they think it's political. That's why we've kept it out of a political framework to be able to offer real meaningful solutions to persons. And that is why we have these persons on to drive this work. So from here on in, you'll see that the committee, the two young persons we brought on, sir, will be making sure that the policy makes sense, that it translates into something. I also want to take this opportunity, though. I think it is common knowledge that you cannot legislate a culture. I think that is common among us in the Labour Party. There was a point during those meetings, those consultations, I would attend the meetings, and the number of stories that came out of hurt, institutional hurt and otherwise, the amount of stories that came out just of the people who were treated badly because they have a disability. So we don't need to pass laws for people to know they need to treat people well. And stories of people laughing at things that I would think that a modern society, sir, would know better. People laughing at children, people, adults in some cases, being physical with other children. We have said in the policy that we intend to put in place a quota, and that person, it's a kind of affirmative action or positive discrimination, whatever you choose to call it, whereby we're going to be asking and we're working. It's not something we're going to bring and force on the private sector, but we're working with the private sector to say, you need to hire persons with disabilities. And we had this conversation with the Ministry of Education. I know that the minister is doing tremendous work in terms of being able to ensure that we do the testing for persons when they come into the school, to guarantee that they get necessary treatment. One of the things that was asked of us a lot was to have people to work alongside persons with disabilities in the school setting. And to be able to do that work, to put persons with disabilities in a place where they could get employment. I began these estimates, sir, suggesting that our ministry must see itself now well above this idea that we're about a handout or even a hand up. I really feel we're at the point where we're talking about real, meaningful transformation and that people want to take care of themselves. And so for us, it is to make sure that this policy has life, to make sure that the community feels it at the end of the day, sir, and to be able to translate these things, sir, to move people from a state where they feel like they're not respected to a point where they feel respected, where they're not allowed to contribute, to a point where they are allowed to contribute. So that is the vision, essentially. Regardless of all the fancy words and terms, that is where we want to do. Allow people to be able to live and produce like anybody else in this country. Thanks for the question, Honourable Member.
Ready? Okay. Thank you, Honourable Chairman. Honourable Minister, I note that in your sub-program 435, you are asking this Parliament to approve what is in fact a further $680,000 more to the National Disabilities Unit, totaling almost $3,300,000. That is something I would certainly support. But my second intervention here now would relate and follows on to what you said, Honourable Minister, in terms of the attitude of too many Barbadians, negative attitude towards people with disabilities. I note that in 2017, the Caribbean Development Bank, in fact, on a report on poverty in the Caribbean, mentioned that people with disabilities, not only in Barbados, but throughout the Caribbean, make up a substantial section of the poorest 5% of our population. And I wish to give you the opportunity, sir, and your team to speak towards how you are going to pursue and the formulation and implementation of a comprehensive public education and awareness campaign pertaining to the national policy, something which, as we heard from the Most Honourable Kerry-Ann, was started by the committee in terms of public outreach and education and awareness among our people, that people with disabilities are entitled, just as everyone else, to the full human and fundamental rights as citizens of this country and as residents of this country, how are we going to further this public education and awareness campaign? Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you to Honourable Member. I think public education is essential. This is so important. And we've had this conversation in the ministry. We've put some funds toward a public education program for the entire ministry to be able to do this work. Sir, I think it is going to be the case that we do this work for persons with disabilities, for the elderly, in relation to managing child abuse. I just think all of the cases under the ministry require significant public education. And so we're going to be doing that level of work. So I also feel the ministry has to, if we're saying one thing, we have to show it. You know, so we spoke about hiring persons with disabilities. We, as a ministry, we've hired several persons with disabilities. And I don't even think it is a case of us lowering our standards to hire persons with disabilities. I don't even think it should be a conversation. In fact, the contribution that is being made now by the persons we brought on is so significant that I would wish other persons would start doing it, because the quality of the community, sir, in Barbados, and their capacity to add value to organizations. This is not about us giving people handouts. It is clear to me that there is tremendous skill in the community that we are missing out on. And again, I want to use this opportunity to encourage people to come forward and to work with persons with disabilities. The PR program we had already started. You would have seen us pushing a lot of PR in relation to the parking spaces, to make sure that the parking spaces remain. But notwithstanding that, people are still parking in the parking spaces that are clearly reserved for persons with disabilities. Again, we make a call for persons, if you know you do not have a disability. The argument that is made is that, you know, when they pass there, nobody is there, but that's the point. The time that you do show up, the spot should be available for a person with disability, but we've done PR, and it hasn't resonated. Apparently, we have to continue with the PR. But I also feel that the law, when we put the law in place, Honourable Member, I think the law has to be clear, the law has to be strong, and the law has to be enforced. When all of the voluntary compliance has failed, because you don't want to start with using a heavy hand, but when all the voluntary compliance has failed, then the law has to represent persons with disabilities. The other point is, and I think the Honourable Leader of the Opposition raised it when he spoke initially about persons who use video cameras and videos to make videos of people. So I've seen several of those with persons with disabilities too. And that there is a recklessness sometimes by members not of this political party, but a recklessness sometimes of the public, sometimes to go and film persons in situations for their own purposes, you know, thinking that it is PR. It is not PR. It is not positive PR. It is discrimination. It shows the person, sir, sometimes in their most vulnerable state, sir. And I would want to say, I do not know of any case on our side where we have asked persons who are in a vulnerable position to go publicly, sir, and lower themselves for the purposes, sir, of making a political point. That is not who we are. That is not what we do. It is clear to me, however, that some persons have chosen to do it. I spoke earlier of the persons with disabilities, the two young persons that we have now taken into the ministry, sir, and are working with them to make sure that they have a decent standard of living. But then people continue to share these videos and to share, you know, there is something about the conscience of a country that at some point in time you have to have a conversation with yourself as a country. And to say that some of the things that we're doing are definitely unhealthy and need to stop. So yes, Honourable Member, you're going to see a lot of PR this year. You're going to see us pushing what's in the policy. We're going to continue to have these meetings. I hope that the public gets to know Janelle and Senator Boyce very well as our advocates over the next few weeks and months and years, so that they understand that this work, this is non-political, serious work.
Honourable Chairman, Honourable Minister, I thank you for that response. I note that in your program plans that you are proposing the identification of at least one site for the establishment of a residential facility for adults with disabilities who have no one to care. And I to care for them. And I can only urge you and your management to pursue this end with alacrity. We have had situations in Barbados where because, let's say, the parent or caregiver of a person with disability, adult person with disability, dies, that person with disability ends up in the psychiatric hospital without having any mental or psychological or psychiatric issues, sir. And that, quite honestly and clearly, is a breach of their constitutional rights. So the this proposed program is very much needed, residential facilities for those adult persons with disabilities in that position. You mentioned, Honourable Minister, of the issue of parking spaces for persons with disabilities. We commend, or I speak for myself, sir, I commend the Ministry of Transport and in association with your ministry, sir, for the first time putting parking spaces in Bridgetown in May 2022. I believe there are 5 or 6 parking spaces now. There need to be more, but at least that was a start after the stakeholders in disabilities signed a petition and presented it to the then Prime Minister way back in 2015. So I think that petition had over 10,000 signatures. Mine was one for parking spaces, public parking spaces for persons with disabilities in the city and in other key areas. The issue of the fine, sir, the fine is only $500 for parking in a parking space reserved for people with disabilities where you're not driving a person with disabilities, more applicably where there isn't such a sticker on your car identifying your vehicle as one that carries persons with disabilities. This fine needs to be increased. I've spoken with the Honourable Minister for Public Works on this issue, and we agreed that I should write her on that, which I'm going to shortly do. I believe, sir, it will get support on the other side too, from speaking with the former members of this Parliament who were at cabinet level when that legislative provision was brought into effect. And I told them $500 was too low. They have now come to realize that it is. So there should be no opposition to an increase in that fine to a good $5,000 I would want to propose. But I wish to give you, Honourable Minister, the opportunity. You mentioned the draft Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill, and I know you said you would like it before this Parliament by the end of this calendar year. But that draft bill, and that was assisted in being crafted by Dr. Jason Haynes, a brilliant Caribbean person who was at the time lecturing at our university, the West Indies Law Faculty. But that draft bill speaks on every aspect of the lives of persons with disabilities, in fact, of people. Health, employment, education, and I suppose coincidentally, we're in the midst of education reform, and the Honourable Member, the Honourable Minister of Education knows that I reach out to her very often on this issue as to taking disabilities education out, and let's see what we can do right now in the short term. Let's wait for the full educational transformation, how we can improve the education of children with disabilities right away. And Minister, you're aware, and the Honourable Minister of Education, that UN agencies and now the European Union have said that they are willing in principle to provide technical and perhaps financial assistance in this regard to us. But Honourable Minister, if you could speak a bit more in terms of the draft legislative provisions on health, employment, and education. These are the three key areas. The Most Honourable Carrie Ann Eiffel and Ms. Janelle Odell often say being a person with disabilities is an expensive exercise in terms of health. We know that the housing policy of providing 10% housing, state housing or state funded or assisted housing for persons with disabilities is already in place, as the Honourable Minister for Housing would say, and is being implemented certainly in the housing development that was opened a few months ago in White Park. That 10% allocation to persons with disabilities as a policy of housing enshrined in the draft policy was implemented, sir. But if, Honourable Minister, you could speak a bit more under those three issues, which are so important to persons with disabilities: health, employment, and education, in terms of what's in the draft Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill. Thank you, Honourable Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Just to be clear, that I think all of the components in this policy, that they're all important. And that is the reason we spent the amount of time that we spent looking at these policies. It's also the reason that we had intense consultation before this information was represented into the policy and consequently, hopefully, into the legislation, if the legislation is passed in the format in which we imagine it. In relation to employment, I spoke briefly about it while suggesting that we are going to be asking for a quota in terms of the, I think it's 5% that we said. We were asking employers to hire 5% of persons with disabilities where possible. And we know this is going to require further conversation, but employment, if the mission that I outlined in the very beginning in relation to allowing everybody to participate in economic activity made sense, and allowing everybody to be part of the development process made sense, and if we accept human development really is about expanding people's choices, then people should have the opportunity to work. And that is why we're putting that into the legislation. I am not so unwise as to suggest, however, that employers will want to hire people who are unskilled. And that is why I feel part of this process in the long term will be about training up persons so that they have the necessary skills. It is also tied to your second question in relation to education. We know that persons have to be educated enough to be able to make a contribution beyond the idea that, you're doing somebody a favor. I made a point when I was on the call-in program a few months ago about the society that we live in. Barbados is what you call a meritocratic society, or at least we like to think so. A society where you get your due based on merit. So that if a person goes for a job, if they have the qualifications, in theory, they will get the job. If they have the associated competencies, they will get the job. We've seen that that is not always the case. And certainly, if you are not producing persons with disabilities because of the flaws in the system, not the flaws in the person, the flaws in the system, because our overall system was flawed, and this is nothing to do with now, this has been the case for generations. If we do not fix the system, then you're gonna produce people who, when they go for the interviews, the employer will say, well, they don't have the skills, they don't have the competencies. But if you think about it, persons with disabilities have difficulty traditionally getting a bus to go places. Transportation is a challenge. They've made it very clear. You might be able to get a bus going, difficult to get a bus back. That is why the ministry has now, we brought 2 vehicles. We're hoping to have another 2 vehicles brought on during the course of this year to be able to help transport persons. But if persons can't get to school, if they can't get to the job, then obviously they're not going to be able to work. So there are these associated challenges that we have to be able to fix. We have to level the playing field. And that is why I think education is going to be important. The early testing, the persons who work alongside persons with disabilities. And as you know, Honourable Member, the biggest challenge I think that we saw, it wasn't even physical disabilities, which is not to say that that has not been difficult. Because I recall if one of my advocates were to speak, if either of them were to speak, and perhaps I would allow them to do so, they would tell you about the challenges in school. Janelle, she gave a speech very recently, a lecture, and spoke about being a person at a secondary school, an older secondary school in Barbados, visually impaired or blind, and the challenges that she faced as a student. And so I know that these things are real. There's some things that we have to be able to fix. I believe it is going to be critical that we fix these things. Sir, I am thankful that the Minister of Education has already made it her business, though, to get down to do some of this work. It is not an overnight thing. And I'm happy that the ministry had those meetings with us. The ministry has been working assiduously to rectify some of these things, sir. But it's oftentimes the bigger challenge I find is for persons with autism. Because the spectrum, sir, as you know, ranges from some functionality to very little functionality. I recall a conversation with a lady who told me her son, now 25 or 26, functions at the level of a 2-year-old, and she, as a single parent, has to physically restrain her 2-year-old man-child, and how difficult it is for her to be able to do it. Now, I recognize that that would be a difficult proposition for a school. So I'm not saying this is an easy fix, but it's something that requires further conversation. What I do know for sure is that we have to offer more support to families who have persons with disabilities. I know we have to offer more financial support. I also feel that the respite care facility that we've been talking about so long has to become a reality so that caregivers have a space to go and relax. It is not easy. The other thing is that when the minister responsible for labor, the Honourable Member for St. Peter, and myself, when we were talking in relation to what is offered at NAS in terms of support for persons with disabilities, because the categories now are very narrow, to widen that category, to allow persons with other disabilities to benefit, but also to allow caregivers to be able to receive something. And then in relation to health, I mean, what else can you say? This has been perhaps some of the most painful stories during that consultation was in relation to health. What it costs to go to a dentist for a person who is able-bodied. You know, you may not consider, but a child with disabilities, a child who's autistic, you know, sometimes they experience more dental issues, but because the system is so flawed, this exacerbates the problem. You have to pay, in many cases, to put the child, what do you call it, like anesthesia, so that the child could have basic, not even operations, basic dental care. Most parents cannot afford that. Or the cost of having to deal with, I mean, just generally other disabilities. Our healthcare system must be in a position where we separate persons who have disabilities and to treat them apart from as if a disability is not a sickness. And the healthcare system must not allocate them as if they're sick. It is that we have to build a system that allows them to be tracked through the system so that their specific needs can be properly catered to. And that is what we're hoping to be able to achieve at the end of the day from this policy. Of course, this is a lot of work, sir. It is going to require the private sector, the public sector, everybody to come on board. I began again by saying that I think this is a private sector problem too, because we want to create people who, beyond coming to the ministry, people who can present and offer themselves up as perfect persons for employment opportunities. And so the private sector has to help us do that. And so I think it's a complex challenge, Honourable Member, but clearly when I look at the policy, when I look at the legislation, it is something that we are working on assiduously. Thanks.
Honourable Chairman, I just wish to wrap up by commending Honourable Minister and his team for their responses and to continue to wish them the best in their endeavours, not only as in relation to persons with disabilities, but to our people on the whole. And on a personal note to say, sir, that in my 30 years this year of serving in public positions, sir, I've never had more satisfaction and joy than I've had in the last 2 years working with this ministry on this issue. And the top management of this ministry are doing a tremendous job and service to this country. And again, to commend my fellow committee members on what they have joined together to produce. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to congratulate the ministry. I'm almost jealous not being able to sit behind you, Honourable Member. I applaud the work that you have been doing over the last, 2 years? I have visibly witnessed the elder care individuals in my community every day on a daily basis, and I recognize the need for it. I want to say, and I hope to be able to visit at some point, the work that you did in the Lancaster House and the Vauxhall facility. I beg your permission to be able to visit as soon as I can. The questions I have today, well, I'll start with one and see if more developed. I was very interested in the 1,000 Family Program, which was quite ably presented. Thank you very much for that. And I recognize the incorporation of education and finding jobs and all the other things that are incorporated into making this program successful. And that led me to be thinking, I think last year and possibly year before, I brought up the issue of having to call several different departments for one thing, basically. And what came out of that, not necessarily by me, is the amalgamation or the proposed amalgamation of your ministry. And I'm interested in that and how far it has gone and where are we with respect to that.
I will ask the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Wiltshire.
Good afternoon, Jehu Wiltshire, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs. Thank you for that question. It certainly provides me with an opportunity to indicate where we are with the amalgamation of the 4 social service entities, the National Disabilities Unit, the Child Care Board, the National Assistance Board, and the Welfare Department. As the Minister would have indicated earlier, this process has been in train for a long time. We have made significant progress, and within the next few months, we will be in a position to launch this new entity. Now, we have been speaking a lot today in relation to 3 fundamental words where the work of the ministry is concerned. And those words are dignity, empowerment, and transformation. And in the Barbados in the 21st century simply cannot have a situation where you have 4 entities offering similar services in terms of the National Disabilities Unit in relation to persons with disabilities, welfare, which provides a social safety net, the National Assistance Board in terms of the elderly, and the Child Care Board in terms of child care and protection. So this new entity is based really essentially on a philosophy where we are going to be focusing on a functional organization that emphasizes a one-stop approach as distinct from the disjointed approach now where we have 4 entities offering similar services. And the one-stop approach is really an approach where all of the services are going to be essentially under one roof, or you can have all of these services in one central location. Also, the approach is also based on the decentralization of services where you are meeting people essentially where they are. And in that regard, we'll be having a number of satellite offices or community-based offices through the island where, and these satellite offices will be chosen or have been chosen on the basis of geospatial mapping with a view to ensuring that the offices are essentially located in places where the clients will be able to access these offices very easily. We are going to be starting the process with at least 9 offices in terms of the first phase. And the process is also going to be based on the establishment of a new management information system. Because to access these services, you have to be in a position to have data. Unfortunately, the situation that we have now, where you have 4 separate entities, you're going to be having a new management information system, which is essentially a central repository of information, where the clients would be able, at the click of a button, be able to access the services that are going to be provided by the new entity. So take, for example, I would put that in practical terms. The social work goes out into the community. The social worker goes with a tablet. In that person's house, the social worker would be able to assist the client in making an application. And let's say that that social worker has visited that house. The social worker does the assessment, and the assessment is not going to be based on a situation where you focus on the individual or on the actual household, but you'll be actually focusing on the family. So if the social worker goes into that house and she realizes that there is a person with a disability who needs assistance, that social worker will be able to relay that information in real time to the unit in the new entity that focuses on persons with disabilities. Let's assume they find an elderly person there who needs assistance. That social worker there will be able to, in real time, refer that particular matter to the unit in the entity that focuses attention on the elderly, as well as if there are issues in relation to children, that social worker will be able to relay that particular issue to the unit in the new entity that focuses on children. So the new entity that we are establishing, as I said, brings all the services in one central entity. And we have, last year we were awarded a contract to the University of the West Indies, the KFL School of Business, to undertake a comprehensive job analysis and job evaluation of the new structure that will be required to carry out, to undertake the services that we need to undertake. So what the new entity is going to be based on a simplified structure based on 4 new directorates. And one directorate will be social care delivery, and in that directorate, that will cover the areas of the elderly, persons with disabilities, rehabilitation, and child care. And those are specialized services that will be undertaken in that directorate. We will have another directorate, family social care and support, and in that directorate, most of the services will be undertaken in the satellite offices. And the functional organization that we are creating essentially is going to be one where most of the services are going to be provided in the satellite offices. We do believe that in several cases, you may need to escalate if you have complex issues to the social care delivery directorate, where those specialized services will be offered. And then we have another director called Transformation and Empowerment, where we are going to be seeking to empower families on the basis of several programs. And in relation to that, the One Family program is actually going to be located in that particular directorate. And then, of course, we have shared services, which will be the administrative service arm that will support the other 3 technical directorates. One other matter I want to draw to your attention as well is that rather than see the social workers as first responders, they're actually going to be generous, being able to provide the services at the point of delivery in the actual satellite offices, where we would expect only a few services, as I said, if they're complex issues, to be escalated. So we are at the point now where we have that very comprehensive report. And Mr. Chair, I'm going to wrap up in a few minutes.
Not a few minutes.
A few seconds, please.
A few seconds, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will come back probably later on to speak in more detail in relation to the other areas of the entity that we are going to be establishing. Thank you.
Just to say, sir, very quickly, that the Amalgamation is something that's obviously very near and dear to my heart. We started this I joined this process when I joined the ministry in 2002. This has been around for a long time. And this is as far as anybody's gotten in this process. I think it's going to make a really big difference. The cabinet paper goes on Thursday. Hopefully we will have cabinet agreement. We have already started meetings with the unions on the amalgamation. The meetings are continuing, and as soon as cabinet approves the final paper, we'll continue those meetings. We've already started talking to the staff about what a new entity would look like and to determine, the best fits in the new entity. And hopefully by the middle of the year to have launched in Barbados this much and long promised family services department to bring a comprehensive, unified, one-stop shop solution to people's social problems in Barbados.
Thank you very much. My next question surrounds the home health program. We had a lot of discussion on the elder care program. I want to know what's happening with respect to that. The director will tell you I made her life a little miserable, trying to get vulnerable, the elderly, attended to by the home helpers who are a little more expertise than the elder care. When I was on the board, I recognized the absenteeism there. What are we doing in terms of providing adequate numbers, really, for the proposed recipients? Is it a case where we will increase the number of posts for the home helpers? Has there been improvement in the attendance in terms of work of the home helpers? Would there be a program, which I think would be a good idea, if the elder care workers could be trained and transitioned into the home health program? Many questions in one.
Director?
So in terms of the numbers for the elder home care program, yes, we recognize that we do have a situation in terms of a shortage of staff when we look at the increasing needs. So right now our ratio of staff to recipients is about 1 in 7, not that they're going to service 7 houses per day. In addition to that, you have to take in other factors in terms of the proximity of houses and where they have to traverse daily. So yes, in short answer, there is need to upgrade and increase the numbers in the home care program. However, that has to be done incrementally, and what we have done in the next financial year, because we recognize that caregiving is arduous, it's taxing and exhaustive if you've ever given care to an older person. So we have to balance clients' needs versus our workers' needs. And therefore, in the next financial year, what we'll be incrementally doing is increasing the number of substitutes that as persons go on vacation, whether they go on sick leave, that they service is offered to our recipients as well. In terms of the absenteeism, our workforce is over 95% women. So we have them at 2 levels, either an aging population who's also susceptible to illness themselves and who have dual roles in that they too give care, so they're kind of sandwiched. So in our training, we will be giving lots of emphasis on the whole concept of self-care and how do we as an organization not only look after our beneficiaries, but look after our workers, showing them that they are valued and that what they do is not just a task, but that they contribute to the overall vision and the goals of the organization. So yes, in short measure, we'll begin with the whole substitutes so that we do not overburden our human resources.
Yes, Honourable Member, that is such a good question because, first of all, we have an aging society. Even at the best of times with the staff complement that we have, we would have been challenged. The fact is that every day, Barbados did very well at extending life. And I don't think we did as well as in planning for the consequences of that extension. And therefore, now we have a population that is aged. We have a workforce that is aged. When I joined the Child Care Board in 2002, I remember a certain Miss Miller, permit me, sir, who told me that I hadn't yet lost my mother's features and she was working longer than me. And that was a conversation that was repeated throughout Child Care Board. There were just women who'd been working there for a long time in the social services sector. A lot of the staff having, I don't want to call you Colleen, Ms. Walcott, would tell you that a lot of her staff is, they've been working 25 years, 30 years throughout the social service sector. So we have an aging staff. And the consequences of that are the same for any aging situation. More sick days, people genuinely get sick, the issues associated with aging. We have to train more persons in elder care. I think there's been a lot of that happening now. There used to be a program, I know community college is doing it, there used to be a program being put on by somebody else. There are a few persons who want to do it, but I think they need to check with National Assistance Board to make sure that when they finish training persons, they have the competency. This is not a joke. You have to have the competencies to come and deal with an aging population. So there's going to be a need to bring on more persons, certainly. I also think we will benefit, though, from economies of scale when we merge the departments together in terms of allocation of social workers, mostly, not so much the home helpers, so that you'd have access to a wider pool. But I would encourage persons now to go and do the necessary training. Lots of persons want to do the work, but they don't have the skills, you see. People want to come on in the elder care program, but even the elder care program, I was saying recently, the ones who we have on have to be trained, and I feel persons who are coming on either need to come trained or be prepared to train as soon as they come. This is not a joke. And we are taking care of persons who have made such a tremendous contribution to Barbados. You would have seen as chair of National Assistance Board, and I think you did an excellent job. You would have seen as chair that this situation is so complicated, You would have seen that some of the problems that we're dealing with are family problems. A mother or a father who's in need of care, but the son don't speak to the daughter accuses the son of abuse. These family dynamics are so complicated. And it requires that our staff have to have the capacity to be able to respond to these emerging challenges. I am satisfied, though, with what I've seen at National Assistance Board. I said to the PS recently, all of the departments in the ministry have really lifted their game, but National Assistance Board has been exemplary in relation to the way they've gone about doing their business. So I take your point. We do need to have more staff, and I just said as I began, 1 in every 5 Barbadians right now, 1 in every 5 Barbadians is over 65. 1 in every 4 is over 60. So we know we have a problem.
Thank you, Chair. My final inquiry over the last few weeks, and I brought this in another fora, and I don't mean to cause trouble, but this is causing a little angst in the medical community, including myself, which it has come across my desk on two other occasions, and I feel a little uncomfortable about it. I have in front of me a document which I'm willing to share with the House that says, Government of Barbados National Disabilities Unit, medical registration form. So it basically has, you put in the name, address, and it says for the purpose of the Trident National ID card, it is my professional opinion that he or she has the following disabling conditions. And fine, we know we need data on the disabled, but some of the queries here are causing a little bit of anxiety among the medical community. The examples being things like, I will give you the list: sensory functions, voice and speech functions, breathing and blood-related functions, digestion and metabolism functions, urinary and reproductive functions, movement functions, skin-related functions, mental functions, and basically to give a brief description of the disability. This has come to me from the psychiatrists who were a little bit hesitant in filling out this form. In that case, it was somebody that needed to get funding from her father's pension. The one that came in front of me was to facilitate welfare assistance, and I did it after my usual ranting and raving, but I did it so as to facilitate the client getting support from the welfare department. I just want somebody to address it and see I really don't see the relation with it with respect to a Trident National ID card. A lot of the information is quite personal, example, reproductive functions, to some extent, mental functions. There's still a lot of stigma attached to some of these things. And if I can get a brief or not so brief explanation to it, I'll be very grateful.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. This is a very good question. I must tell you that you have brought this form to my attention. I was unaware of this form, and I'd spoken to the director of the National Disabilities Unit in relation to the form, and the data that it was seeking to collect. It is my knowledge that having spoken to him in relation to the form, a lot of the information that was on this form in relation to determining what is a disability had come from some other source in terms of an international source. Anyways, we had agreed to put the form aside. And if they haven't put it aside, then they need to put it aside. And that the thing is, whatever is done in Barbados must suit Barbados. I'm also told that the Trident ID does not require details on disability, and just some confirmation that a person does qualify as an individual. The form, of which I am now familiar because you raised it with me, I'd asked the director to speak to it, but it seems that, you know, when you look at disabilities elsewhere, there are these questions that are asked. But Barbados must do things to suit Barbadian realities. And so I'd asked him at the time to set the form aside. If that form is still in circulation, it should be paused. And that we need to create a form that is simple, that is respectful, because dignity must mean something, and to use that information to determine whether a person has a disability or not. I will accept, though, that the form was used. That is what was told to me, so you're not making it up. But I'd asked for that form to be paused. And if there's a need to do data collection, to do it in a way that is sensitive and respectful of the person.
Thank you very much, Chair. On another round, I will bring up children in terms of adoption, Ms. Richards, and how we are getting the message out. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported the progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:15 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chairman will be suspended until 2:15 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 2:15 p.m.